welcome everybody. I'm excited for this Legacy Network event this afternoon. Actually late morning for some of you, might be joining in from the West Coast. This is something I came to the team with here at Legacy, about a month ago, and I said, there's something that I'm experiencing in a lot of the coaching and consulting work that I'm doing with a number of our advisory firms. And I'm finding that there's a lot of missed opportunities. And there's a root cause to a number of where these opportunities are being missed. And I'm going to talk about a few of those today that I expect that each and every one of you can look inward into your business, into your practice, and see where you might be able to refine and enhance, how some of these things that might be hindering your opportunities for, new prospect, new client interactions and engagements that you might be, passing by or overlooking today in your practice. And so, I've titled the presentation today, as Holly stated, demonstrating your definable difference. And many of you have probably heard me say over the years that, advisors are always asking, Legacy, our team here, how can you help me be different? Everybody wants to be different, because the reality is when you look at the landscape, of the marketplace in which you're all operating, it's a very competitive marketplace. Not only are there just a number of advisors, but when you take the mass confusion of really the difference in what all these advisors do and their value propositions, it makes this landscape just so much cloudier and so much muddier for people that are trying to make decisions whether or not they should meet you, whether they should take a phone call, whether they should return an email, and really whether they should fundamentally sit down and engage with you in some level of meaning dialogue. So while I totally understand the desire and need from a competitive standpoint to be different, the thing that we've really honed in on at Legacy is you need to be able to demonstrate your definable difference. And I'm going to kind of talk about that in a few different ways here today, and really try and drive this moment home, because here's I think this whole demonstratable aspect really goes to, processing styles, for example, where you're dealing with different types of prospects. Some people that might be more visual, some people that might be more auditory from the words, or, people that are more kinesthetic around, their feeling and things of that nature. And so if you're demonstrating things and using your words, you're going to connect with a much larger population, of the world. And so many of our clients are so great with your words and your vernacular. Being able to create pictures that are further demonstrating your difference is going to just connect with a much greater percentage of the population. Now, going back to hitting, kind of this difference thing, we get the demonstrate, but the difference thing, there's lots of ways in which you can attempt to be different. And there's probably lots of ways in which you're attempting to be different in the work that you do. But the thing that I will say that we find apparent and rampant in our most successful advisors or advisory teams is that they focus on the difference that they make in the clients' lives that they serve, as opposed to stepping into that response that is very natural, and it feels like what we're supposed to do in answering a question. So how are you different from my other advisors? It's very natural, and it almost feels expected that we have to step in and we have to actually try and communicate and articulate and maybe demonstrate our difference. But the thing I want to really point out, and I want to, kind of bring us to in our conversation here today, is as soon as you start responding to how you're different, you immediately are taking a defensive posture. You're putting yourself in a very, what I would say, just simply a weak position in this conversation, because the reality is that you don't know a lot about their advisors that they're working today, the things that this person might like or dislike about the people that they're working today. And it might be different for the multiple people that they're meeting with, but because you don't really have a strong knowledge for what those people do, how they behave, how they communicate, what value they bring or don't bring, it's very difficult and almost kind of silly for you to begin to start to defend how you might be different. All you can do is talk about what you do and the results that you've gotten and what you believe to be your unique value proposition. But doing it from that stance, going back to, puts you in a very defensive posture. The other thing that it does is, you've all heard me talk about trust and using the trust formula: credibility, reliability, and intimacy, right? Those are all the top level things that we want to drive. We want to be 10s in our credibility. We want to be a 10 in our reliability, and we want to be a 10 in our level of intimacy and depth of relationship with our clients. And that's when we're sitting on their side of the table at the center of their lives. The reality is, though, that denominator that I talk about all the time, and that we talk about at Legacy, the denominator of that self-interest or self-orientation, one of the things I'm finding a lot of advisors aren't recognizing is, as soon as you step into that defensive posture and trying to explain or demonstrate why you're different from their other advisors, you're now talking a lot about yourself. And as you know from that formula, that drives, our self-interest, and can come across in a lot of ways as, just as not right, and not making the other person feel good in that dialogue. So there's a number of negatives that I want to point out that we're falling into. There's a lot of traps in trying to jump into responsiveness around, so how are you, I've got lots of advisors serving me and my family or my business, or I work with a lot of advisors, why do I need to work with you? How are you different? And things of that nature. So just be thinking about that. How I want you to be thinking about responding, and going back to the way in which we see our most successful advisory firms stepping into that, is really just addressing head on the fact that, because I don't have a knowledge of your relationship with the advisors you're working with and the way in which they actually go about their business and working with you, it'd be unfair for me to talk about how or why I'm different from those other advisors. The best way for me to answer that question is really for me to talk about the difference in the clients' lives that we serve. So what have I just done there? I've really just taken a moment to deflect. I'm making it about them, right? Because they're a prospect. They're kind of at this point in time beginning to start to interview whether they want to work with me or have a relationship with me. And by me creating an environment where I'm going to talk about how we care for, how we serve, how we add value to the clients that we actually do work with, what I'm doing is painting a picture for how we're going to care for them. Now, what does that do to them from a psychological standpoint? They know what they like and dislike about their current advisor relationships. And so this allows them to listen to what you're saying and the ways in which you work with your clients, the ways in which you impact and add value in your clients' lives, the ways in which you're different. And now they're drawing all of these connection points and all of these, conclusions potentially for actually why it is that you are actually different than their other advisors. And if you're really connecting, you're pointing out things that they don't like about their current advisors and they really wish that they would do for them based upon how you're articulating your value proposition. So that's the first thing I want to drive home. It's, it's competitive. It's easy to jump in to really responding and trying to address, why I'm different, what I do, the results we've gotten for other clients. But I really urge you to think about not jumping into that, not positioning yourself in a way that you might be demonstrating a high level of self-orientation, and you're making potentially accusations about how an advisor may or may not be performing or delivering value to somebody, and you really don't know. And you win more, and you will move them closer to you by talking about how you make a difference in the clients' lives that you do work with. Or I like to use the word serve, but that doesn't resonate with everybody. So find your own language in that, but deflect it on to an opportunity to then demonstrate your value. We'll get into what would I do then when it's, let me show you how we make an impact in the clients' lives that we do serve. That'd be the best way for me to demonstrate, our difference. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as we go. First impressions are critical. When you were going through the Ignite course, you heard, our team here at Legacy talk about power and first impressions, no doubt about it. I'd urge those that haven't gone through the Ignite course to go through the online course again and revisit it. You'll learn and pick up all kinds of nuances. But around first impressions, the thing I want to drive home is, 12 years ago, we came across a study that talked about the power of first impressions. And what that study said 12 years ago was that when you have a first interaction with somebody, that first impression, that it takes 7 additional interactions, touches, they called them, in order to be able to change that first impression. So if you met somebody in the first time and they said, "Hey, Todd, what do you do?" And we're kind of striking up conversation. They say, "Hey, what do you do?" And I say, "Oh, we manage, we manage money for, a group of successful business owners." While some of you may not think that that's a bad response, what it does is it presents an impression in that person. And it might be the fact that they've got all kinds of investment people that they work with, and it's not going to create an opportunity for business. And I'm sitting there saying, "Gosh, I really wish I didn't say that. I wasn't prepared for that." So it's going to literally take me 7 additional touches, whether that's a note that I might send afterwards, or an email I might send afterwards, or a text, or a phone conversation that I might try and get. Every one of those interactions, I have to reframe it in the way that I wished I responded, and I have to be consistent every single time. Otherwise, it's going to fragment it. This is why we talk about the importance of websites being aligned with what you're saying when you're out, meeting new people. Because believe it or not, people go and check out our websites, our social media, especially if they actually intend on following up with us and pursuing us and maybe doing business with us. So there's a really tremendous need to have alignment with what you and your colleagues are saying when you're out meeting people and interacting with people, and you're demonstrating your difference, right? And when somebody comes and checks you out, that there's an alignment there on your website and all of those things. So that's really, really critically important. But back to the studies and all of these things, we came across a recent study that was done 2 years ago, so 10 years later. And unfortunately, I'm here to report to you that these first impression statistics have not gotten better. They've actually gotten worse. And what this study pointed out was now it takes 12 additional touches to change a first impression. So there's so many ways in which I can talk about how we make first impressions. It might be the fact that you had a new client engage with you and you address a tactical issue that they had. Maybe it was investments, maybe it was insurance, whatever it might have been, that might be the impression that really sits inside of them of you. And so, he or she is my investment person, or my insurance person, or the person that helps with stock options, or whatever it might be. But those of you that are on this call with us here at Legacy want to play such a bigger role in your clients' lives. You have so much more value to bring, and there's so much more opportunity to pursue. We don't want to be stuck in these buckets. And so first impressions done right are really, really important, which gets us to this whole aspect of today's message. And so today, if it takes 12 additional touches for those first impressions, why is that? Well, I think that we're finding a more untrusting environment based upon how things have transpired over the years. You know, you look at all the regulatory change in our industry. Well, unfortunately, a lot of that is being pumped out, you know, to the marketplace, to consumers, like not to the marketplace, but a lot of that is being pumped out to consumers in consumer magazines that they're reading, you know, around fiduciary, around DOL and all these regulatory changes that are coming down on the industry. And it's causing those people to, you know, have greater distrust. And, or let me just say, not greater distrust, but to be less trusting, less tentative, less willing to just simply open up and move into relationships freely. And so what it means is you got to be more on point. You got to be more on your A game. You got to ensure that more of those first impressions happen right from the get-go, so that you don't now have to go back wheel and try and fix a whole bunch of things, because it takes a lot of time and effort and energy. And as I said along the way, you know, consistency. So, you know, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, you know, how do we actually control these events? When we look at the most successful advisory teams in our network, in our community, there's two things that show up. They're running a high level of activity in their business, and so they're focused on always keeping a high level of activity in themselves and their teams, you know, in their business pipeline, if you will. And they are great at relationships. So it's a high level of activity, and it's the quality of how they do relationship. I mean, this is ultimately the essence of what Legacy is about. We are a business that's focusing on helping advisors, you know, grow their revenue. And we do that by, you know, increasing revenue and, you know, and increasing, you know, growing their revenue and increasing their profitability. And as you know, we do that with systems. We do that with helping them increase their capacity in their business. We do that by helping them differentiate in the marketplace and developing new skills in ways in which to do that. And so you bring the high level of activity and excitement and energy around the business, and then we bring the framework for that quality of that relationship and how to do it systematically from client to client to client. But these are traits that are consistent in the most successful, thriving advisors that we see. And so one of the things that caused me a month ago to come to the team, because I was seeing it and hearing it regularly, you know, in my some of my consulting calls that I was doing with some of our firms, and some of my coaching engagements that I was working on with some of our client firms. And, you know, the thing that kept showing up was, you know, they're getting a number of names and, you know, what we would frame as introductions, but that's not resulting in a high enough you know, percentage of meetings and ultimately engagements. And, you know, one of the things that we kept hearing from time to time was, you know, we get introduced to somebody and we're trying to, you know, schedule a first meeting or maybe simply a first phone call, and that's presenting challenges. So we were finding that people were actually getting stuck even at a point of being able to have that first interaction with somebody. And that's presenting challenges. You know, I grew up, as most of you know, in financial services, really in an insurance company in financial services. And like many of our clients, you know, we grew up in a system that, you know, our firm called the one card system. And that system was, you know, you get 10 names, you get 3 of those 10 to meet with you, and you engage with one of those. And so when I first heard that model, I said, holy mackerel, like that's a tremendous amount of work to get one client. And as we have, you know, moved through our business and looked at our engagement process and the things that we're teaching, we are consistently looking at ways to change that model. But it's part of what creeped back in me as I was talking to these firms and hearing, you know, yeah, we're getting a number of names, but we can't get in front of these people, or we can't get them on the phone, or we maybe had a phone call, but we can't get to that first meeting with them. And so I started to calculate this with some of our client firms. And I said, okay, let's just use a statistic that I'm sharing with you today of, let's just say in a 30-day period of time, you get 10 names. Out of that 10 names, how many of those people do you actually end up getting in front of? And most of them were somewhere around 4 to 5. So it wasn't a terrible number. It was a pretty good number. But I said, okay, let's just say it's 5 every month that you're getting in front of, but there's 5 that you're not getting in front of. And maybe a couple of the 5 you don't want to get in front of. It wasn't meant to be. But let's just say that there's 3 that absolutely you should get in front of, but it's either what I've got up here on this screen. It's, I've already got a guy, I've got a person that handles that for me. We hear this all the time. This is kind of the blow off, or it's just simply, we can't even just get them into a phone conversation or into face-to-face meeting. We can't even get to that point. And so if we said that, if we said that, let's say 2 of them weren't good, and so that's 3 people that you could meet with. If you look at it from that standpoint, and I talked to these clients, I said, hey, so what's the average revenue on a new client for you in the first year? And I'm just going to use an average on this because some of our firms are all over the place. Some of them, some of our firms, it could be 20 or 30,000 bucks. For other firms, it might be $5,000. And so we'll just say it's a $5,000, typically it's $5,000 of revenue to us in the first year. So if you do the math calculation on that, there's 3 opportunities that you're not able to get in front of, each of those worth $5,000, right? That's 15,000 bucks a month in your business that you're not getting in front of. You're not getting an opportunity to capture in the business. I'm not going to sit and do the whole exercise, but how long has it been going on for? How much money have we left on the table? And, then you start doing the calculations out going forward of what that revenue looks like going forward as it grows. And the thing that I came to the realization on is, our clients are leaving a lot of money on the table. And if we're about helping you increase revenue and, reducing, other overhead costs and things like that in the business, like that's not good. So, partly that's what got us into this talk here today is how can we help you be engaging and getting in front of and having an impact and ultimately engaging with a higher percentage of the people that you're being introduced to. And, so that's really the essence of this. So, part of the challenge is when you look at existing relationships, and if existing relationships are the ones that are introducing you to future potential clients, what we need to look at is how often are you trapped in a bucket? And you've heard me talk about the buckets, I'm sure, many of you several times. And what I mean by buckets are, this is my investment manager, or this is my estate planner, or this is my wealth manager, or this is my insurance agent, or financial planner, broker. The list can kind of go on and on, but these are the majors. And because consumers are not really skilled on how to define us, we need to do the appropriate job for how they can define the relationship with us. And I'm going to bring you back to some of the core fundamentals of legacy that we teach for how you can be doing this, because this hits a number of areas of your business that are impacting those numbers. It's impacting the number of people that you're actually ultimately getting introduced to, but then your ability to convert those into phone calls, into meetings, into engaged clients. And, we talk about all the time that oftentimes clients remember what you did for them last. And so even if you engage them in a legacy type of relationship with proper discovery and really did that above the line planning that we talk about, but over time, there's been less above the line conversations and maintenance and engagement around that, and more of your conversations or their memory of what you've done last is more about below the line or below the horizon types of activities for them, that could very likely be the way that they are introducing you and talking about you in their circles of influence, if you will. So, kind of partly the lesson here is that we need to make sure that we understand how people see us and the role that they see us in playing in their lives, because hopefully you're with legacy because you want to be at the center of your clients' financial lives. Now, it doesn't make sense for some of you with larger practices and lots of clients to say that I'm going to be at the center of all of my clients' lives when we might be talking about 1,000, clients. But there is a percentage of those clients where absolutely they have the need, the capacity, and the desire for you to be in that role, in that relationship with them. But again, it's very easy for them to think of you based upon the last experience or the last thing you did for them. And that's why it's so critically important to be continuously in that above the line advisory role with them and maintaining that difference and maintaining that seat on the client side of the table. And so, I wanted to put this slide up here because I wanted to kind of just point out the simple fact that in many situations, the way people are referring to you is based upon what you've done for them lately or the last big thing you did for them, or just how they might simply introduce you to somebody or talk about you. It's not right or wrong, but this is an opportunity to think about how can you get that realigned and more appropriate in the way that you want them talking about you and you want them introducing you. So, I talked about, client referrals, there for a minute. I wrote this in here, strike your word from this vocabulary. And that word is not the whole, aspect of getting referrals, but it's just that word referrals. I just think it's so oversaturated, and the way people are asking for it, in this business is just, it's so overdone. And I much prefer introductions. And I see a number of our clients transitioning to introductions. And there's some real key things. I mean, we've done, a number of studies on looking at advisor practices and those that are using referral language versus introduction language. It's very different what shows up. What we've seen pretty consistently is people tend to refer, in many ways at an equal level, right? But in a lot of ways, people actually refer down. So when you look at referrals, they tend to be people that are equal size to them, but oftentimes you see them as people that are below them. So I'll refer you this person, I'll refer you this person. But when you think about introductions, people almost always introduce equal, but in many cases they introduce up. And when somebody's making an introduction as opposed to giving you a referral, it's just a very different process and way in which that occurs and that happens. And there's a much different type of a handoff and so on and so forth to introductions. But my point here is that where does this kind of show up? We talked about, client referrals. What are clients saying about you when they are introducing you? This is a big deal. Understanding that, helping them to reframe how to introduce you, how to talk about you when they do in fact talk to you to others. And you all know, you've got clients that are different on this, meaning you've got a group of clients that they're not referrers, they're not introducers. They are people that's just not who they are. When people are talking about, I need we're not happy with our lawn people and we want somebody else, they're not people that jump in and say, use True Green. That's who we use and they're fantastic. So you've got people that just don't want that obligation, don't have that desire, but you've also got a group of people that absolutely will if you ask, and you've got a group of people that are talking about you already all day, and you need to really understand what it is they're saying. The next level down is professional introductions. And, you know, I'm talking about accountants and lawyers, and you know, some of our clients who are accountant lawyers might be on the phone today, and you're probably going to unleash on me, but it's okay. You know, we all know, like, the reciprocation back and forth and all those things is not always where we want it to be. But you know, what I talk about in the world of fee-based engagements is making sure that you're getting out to all of the top professional relationships in your community or around the country if you're working more globally, and making sure that they understand the evolution of your practice, how you engage, how you work with people. Because I will just tell you that fee-based engagements have a huge uptick on their ability and desire to actually make introductions on your behalf. It's just that simple. When they know that they're going to send somebody to you to go through a planning process and go through discovery and really get some significant value out of that, there is less of a scarcity to send somebody to you when they don't feel as though they have to buy a product in order to become a successful client of yours. And so that's a really important message to get out. And again, you need to be making sure that you're talking to all your professionals, and again, demonstrating for them that definable difference about how you make a difference in the clients' lives that you serve. Them seeing that and experiencing that will be really, really powerful. And then the last thing is, a number of our firms are doing, you know, joint work with others. And I can't tell you how many times we have, you know, my partner Rob Falvey has done calls, you know, with our advisor and somebody they're doing joint work with, and we have this conversation and say, listen, you know, you've been great in introducing a number of folks that you thought were a great fit for working with Todd. You know, can I ask you a question? When you see that as a good opportunity to bring Todd in on an engagement, what do you actually tell that client or that prospect? How do you actually introduce them? And when Todd, the advisor, hears, you know, this other advisor say how they introduce him, you know, oftentimes it doesn't create a warm and fuzzy. It's like a shriek, not how you want to be introduced. And so when you show up to that first meeting without understanding how you've been introduced and how that joint work person has actually talked about you prior to you show, you don't know what you're coming into. You don't know what the frame of mind and expectation is. So it's really critical that you have these conversations with folks that you are engaging in joint work with, to help them be better and better prepared. And they'll love you for it because they're uncomfortable with how exactly to say it. So these are three of the ways in which it's really showing up today in your business that you really need to think about getting out and reframing. Now, you know, we talk about first impressions and these things, and now you know, how do we kind of change first impressions? Well, the first thing, you know, I'm going to talk with you about is the bridge talk. This is not an easy thing. We have trained thousands of advisors now, you know, over the, you know, 20 plus years in doing this on this method of how do you frame that initial introductory language. And we've come up with a really, really powerful formula, which doesn't mean it's easy to come up with your language, but being able to simply define who you help and the problems you solve, and making that simple, clear, and concrete allows people to talk about you, to introduce you in a much more powerful way. So owning this and knowing this across your entire organization and team, and I mean everybody in your business really owning this language for the business, will create all kinds of opportunities for the business. That's just for you and for your team. But as you think about going out to other professionals and making sure that they understand who you help and the problems that you solve and how you do it, right? And going out to your existing clients and reminding them of it, talking to those that you are engaging or engaging you in joint work to help them out in certain situations, helping them be better at introducing your language. I can't tell you enough how powerful that will be. And being in front of thousands and thousands of advisors over the years, I know that this is not an easy thing to conquer, and especially to stay away from all of those bucket terms, right? Estate planning, financial planning, wealth management, investment management. That doesn't define who you help and the problems that you solve. Those are the ways in which you solve problems, and they're bucketable, and it's easier for people to say, I've got a person who helps me with that. So I really urge you to go back if you don't have this nailed. If you're listening today or at some point in the future to the recording and you don't have this nailed, your language down, and your team and all of your team doesn't have this nailed, this is an exercise you absolutely need to go back to the drawing board, because this is the first impression. This is when you're interacting and meeting people and people are talking about you. This is the language that they need. And it's part of the challenge in why, you're not getting in front of the full share of the people that you should be getting in front of and engaging with. So really urge you to go back, go through the Ignite course and the Bridge Talk section inside of that. And you'll find a number of great examples. And we're here to help, obviously, as you know, along the way. We're here to help you dial that in as well. The other aspect of demonstrating your definable difference that I'm just flat out going to say is this is the black belt of the legacy system. There's no better way that I've seen, and obviously I'm biased, but I'm just telling you flat out, there's no better way to demonstrate your definable difference to a complete stranger or to a long-standing client that you want to make sure they understand your value than the planning horizon. This is, it's the secret sauce in the entire legacy system. So when somebody says to me, hey, Todd, I got all kinds of advisors I'm working with, why do I need to work with you? Or what makes you different? It's like, you know what, Rob, that's a great question. And, because I don't really have a basis for who you're working with today and the types of things they're doing or maybe not doing for you, it'd be totally out of line and inappropriate for me to try and challenge that. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. But what I would feel comfortable doing is taking a few minutes and really just sharing with you the difference that we make in the clients that we actually do work with and we do serve. Would that be all right if we could just take a couple of minutes and do that? Who's going to say no to that? Well, somebody I don't want to work with, but the lion's share of people are just not going to say no to that. And boom, that's when I'm going to come in with the planning horizon. This is why it's so critical for you to be able to own this, to be able to draw this anywhere you are, on a pad of paper, on a napkin. You got to be able to own this talk. And what I've shared with many of you, and I'm going to repeat it again here, I just had this example with a client, even just early yesterday morning, on Monday morning, where I was talking with one of our advisors, a woman, very successful advisor, but she had this great prospect she just couldn't get to meet. And what I told her was, this person is pushing you off because they think you're just like every other financial advisor, and they've got a ton of them and they've worked with lots of them. They're blowing you off because they think you're just going to be like everybody else. I said, you need to use the Planning Horizon phone script. And so she called me on Monday morning. We had a coaching call, and she called to report in that it went unbelievable. And she blew this woman away who's running a very significant business. And her response at the end of the Planning Horizon talk was, why didn't you just tell me this in the beginning? And, our client, the advisor, was like, my goodness, I'm never not doing this again. And let me be clear. She didn't talk her through it, because people can't visualize this, especially if you're visual people, you want to see it. What she did was she used the Planning Horizon phone script, and she walked this woman, business owner, through it while the business owner woman on the other end of the phone drew it out. And so she said, get a piece of paper. It doesn't need to be big, and draw a line across the middle of that paper and write Planning Horizon over it, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to walk you all through the talk because you all should really well know this talk by now. But what she pointed out in the fact of part of the reason in which I was introduced to you and that you were talking with so-and-so, my client I've worked with for 20 years, was because you've got a number of different strategies, you've got a number of different advisors you're working with, but the reality is that's starting to become overwhelming and you're feeling at the center of it all. Nobody's coordinating it. And furthermore, the fact that you don't know whether the things you're doing and the advice you're getting has you on track for how you want things to be in the future. And see, in our work, we started a different place, right? And so she brought in the whole planning horizon and said, listen, I don't want to come and talk to you about strategies that you ought to do or different products and things that you might consider or haven't thought about or no one's ever told you about. What I want to do is come and have a conversation about understanding where are you today and where is it you want to get to and how aligned do you feel like that is with where you want to be in the future, how you want things to play out. And that's when the business owner turned to her and say, why didn't you tell me this the first time we met? Why didn't so-and-so tell me this? So anyways, she ended up with an amazing meeting, but the planning horizon demonstrate your definable difference, right? You can absolutely do this over the phone. And I'm telling you right now, I used to say 90% of the time, I'm telling you right now, 100% of the time when people are resisting meeting with you or getting back to you or whatever, it's because they have you in a bucket and they think you're just like every other financial person coming in to sell them stuff, tell them stuff, and all those things. And you got to stop them dead in their tracks and you got to call them on it. And you got to say, hold on a second. I think you might be confused with what it is I want to come talk to you about, because I don't typically get this reaction from the people in which we work with. And so all I'm asking is for 5 minutes on a phone call to help you understand the difference we make in the clients that we work with. And if people aren't willing to give you that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I think you're going to find that those people aren't worth pursuing and chasing, because it's going to be an all-day conversation and they're probably not serious. So I really wanted to point this out. These are two pieces you totally need to hone in on. I'd love to have conversations with you about it. There's all kinds of resources, as you know, as I've said along the way. You've got the Bridge Talk Builder Guide if really getting in and honing in on your language around your Bridge Talk and really nailing that. We're here to help, and that guide and that module inside the Ignite course has really got all the lessons and all you need in there to really get that dialed in. But of course, we're always here to support. The Approach Talk Guide, and really, if you just don't feel like you've got your approach language around the planning horizon nailed, that's something you got to do, because it is absolutely, without a fathom of a doubt, a demonstrable, definable difference, and it's impactful. And then the third part, I just said, and then in the Ignite course also is simply just a planning horizon phoning script. And, all we did was, just kind of shifted gears on the planning horizon script for somebody that might be walking somebody through it over the phone. And it doesn't take a lot of time, and it's actually pretty quick. And it will allow people to understand that you're not just coming in to sell them a whole bunch of stuff and have a typical type of conversation that they're used to with other financial advisors. So that's what I had for you today. I really hope that you took something away here today. I expect you did, as it relates to how can you be better demonstrating your definable difference. I really appreciate you coming out and listening in to the conversation here today and participating in this network event. And I'm going to just see if Holly collected any questions along the way, and I'll hang out for a couple of minutes here. And if we don't have any, then otherwise I'll let you run, and we'll see you next time.